Welcome in to Retro Wrestling Rewind. As always, I am one half, that's 50% of the greatest broadcast team in the history of this great sport. I am David Fine alongside Alex G. We make up the broadcast team for Retro Wrestling Rewind. Welcome, Alex G, to episode number 5.
What's going on, boss?
Last week we spoke about Starrcade and the 12 matches and the stuff leading up to Starrcade and the Magnum TA injury, the Nikita Koloff babyface turn, the Skywalker scaffold match. But this week we're going to talk fallout from Starrcade 86, and there was a lot of fallout. It was a great event. But the next big event, it wasn't a pay-per-view. It was a lot of house shows. It was a Bunkhouse Stampede, but we'll get to that in a minute. What was your thoughts in, coming out of Starrcade 86? What were your thoughts about the fallout?
They're coming off the biggest pay-per-view of the year, the biggest, live event of the year. And now they're getting in, the next phase of what they're going to do for the first quarter of 1987. So you still have the Flair Nikita thing that's still going on. Again, don't forget that the main event ended up in a double disqualification. So we're continuing with that. We also have Barry Windham, who's also going after the NWA World Heavyweight Championship as well. So it's kind of a three-way feud in the first quarter of 1987 between Nikita, Barry, and Flair.
Yeah, and speaking of Barry, kind of going really retro. I was watching some Mid-Atlantic this past week when he was under the Blackjack Mulligan Jr. Gimmick, and he's definitely a star of the time. So we thought.
It's funny if you see a picture of Barry Windham today. He is the spitting image of Blackjack Mulligan. Like, they look very alike, and they're approximately the same size now because. Barry's way bigger than he was when he was wrestling.
Yeah, and Barry, he's, coming up in the future, he's going to be part of a great angle where he turns on the Total Package Lex Luger and the whole.
We make a joke on the NWA 1984 project where we all scream, "Barry, no! Barry, no!" Is that Jim Ross's call on that?
Well,
ridiculous.
I know in the future we're going to probably, kind of get into the dumb. I don't know. This is not going to be on this show. I'm just kind of going on a rant. The dumbness and the mental block that wrestling fans must have had back in 1986, 87, 88, when they didn't know that was the Midnight Rider wasn't Dusty Rhodes. It would have been one thing if he didn't talk. But he taught. But we're gonna. That's neither here nor there.
They had Magnum underneath the mask too because they did the whole James Boy gimmick where there was this tag team, and it was like, hey, that's Dusty Rhodes and Magnum TA. Like, what are you guys doing?
God, it was
again an angle that we've seen. I think the best incarnation of that was in Florida when he did the Midnight Rider in Florida originally for the first time. That was really good, and I think in Florida they were a little bit more in on the joke. Like,
yeah.
Oh, this is Dusty trying to, screw around with Kevin Sullivan to the point where the Midnight Rider was lined up for an NWA World Title match, and he actually did win the match. But according to the rules of the NWA at the time, he would have to unmask in front of the NWA president, and they had the rule if anyone found out that it was Dusty underneath the mask, he would be suspended for life. So he literally had to give back the NWA World Title so he wouldn't have to unmask. Which is a great continuation of that angle.
Yeah, it was a great continuation of that angle. But speaking of continuations of stuff, coming out of Starrcade 86, were there any feuds? What was your take? Because we, of course, our motto here on Retro Wrestling Rewind, and I know this your life wrestling motto is you watch 6 weeks before and 6 weeks after a big show. Yeah. The 6 weeks after Starrcade 86, my take, it was at least they were building up to the Bunkhouse Stampede. They were talking about, and I think Ricky Morton came out. He had hurt himself in that cage match coming out of Starrcade 86. And, I love Ricky Morton. He's kind of the Shawn Michaels of the Rock and Roll Express. And, Robert Gibson is kind of the Marty Jannetty.
If he was 4 inches taller and 35 pounds bigger, he would have been NWA World Champion.
You really think that?
Yeah, if Ricky Morton was around today, he would be the top guy in WWE right now.
But the funny thing is, you say that, but then eventually coming up in the next year or so, they're going to be giving the NWA title to Rugged Ronnie Garvin.
Oh, we got to talk about that because according to Ricky Morton, he was asked to take the belt off of Flair, and he denied it. He declined that run that Ronnie had. So there was a bunch of guys who were apparently asked to have that championship, take it off of Flair, just to give it back in Chicago. And Barry Windham was also asked as well, according to sources.
And according to Ricky Morton, he didn't want to be the one to take the championship off Flair.
Yeah.
Man, we are gonna have to get. I'm gonna have to tweet the great Ricky Morton and talk to some of my contacts. We're gonna have to get on him and kind of deep delve into that. And maybe
and he said he quit the NWA because they wanted to cut his hair in a hair match. And he was like, "No, are you insane?"
There's so many things about the Rock and Roll Express that I could go into. Back in, I think it was 86, they had 86, 87, they had a Ricky and Robert fan club, and they had a whole promo about
that. On these shows, we see the kind of the build up for the fan club, and I think later on they did the win a date with the Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, according to Tony Schiavone, the Rock and Roll Express had nothing to do with that. They didn't want to have anything to do with that. They were like, "Hey, Tony, you come up with all that," and of course, they had a contest where a younger fan under the age of 14 or 15 or under 18, sorry,
yeah.
He could win a date, and their parents would come with it, have a good time. They go around to different matches or different events. Then they had the win the date with Ricky Morton, with the Rock and Roll Express, and that was someone over 18, and that's all I'm going to say is they were known to be the ladies men back in the day, and
you would see it go back and watch some of those shows, like they were getting mauled on the way to the ring.
Yeah,
and you would hear the high pitched squeal of preteen girls going yee. You see girls crying in the front row when they're getting heat on Ricky. It's insane.
And speaking of them walking through walking from the back through the crowd, I mean that was back then. That was something that they did every show, yeah. Every big show, every small show, every house show. But there is no chance in hell, as Mr. McMahon would say, of that happening now. I mean there are so many people that would attack a wrestler or get overzealous. I mean, what were your thoughts on them doing that back? Did they just not care? Or there wasn't.
I think it was the other way around. I think they were more afraid of the wrestlers because the lawsuits started coming in hot and heavy. Yeah. So if you have a fan who is going to take a swing at, say, Tully Blanchard, and then Tully Blanchard punches him in the face, Tully Blanchard's going to lose a lot of money, and the promotion's going to use a lot of money. So I think that's why they spread out the walkway, they start putting up the barricades and what have you. If you ever see Terry Gordy shove that fan, is one of my all-time favorite clips of all time from World Class, mm-hmm. where he just this fan is wearing a cowboy hat and he's giving Gordy crap, and Gordy just shoves him like, oh.
I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, you take the chance of getting hit, and people are lawsuit. I don't know if back then they were as lawsuit happy as they are.
Coming they started coming. Cornette tells a story that they started getting hot and heavy when he was in Mid-South, and then he got sued 5 or 6 times when he was in Crockett because he would whack fans with the tennis racket and what have you.
Yeah.
So they were coming. They started to come.
And the other thing that came out of Starrcade, they had Uncle Ivan and Crusher Khrushchev. They were still the U.S. Tag Team Champions, and Ivan was kind of building up how Nikita turned on his family, turned on his country. I mean, do you think?
This is when they brought in Vladimir Petrov too.
Yeah.
Which is another guy from Minnesota out of that Road Warrior, Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig kind of mold, where he was like the baddest bouncer on the face of the earth, and they brought him in, and he was crappy.
Yeah, I mean, not many of the wrestlers, the Russian wrestlers. I mean, Nikita was. I thought he was great when he was bald, when he was the Russian Nightmare. But when
he had hair,
when he had hair, I think that's when he found Jesus. And I mean,
the second babyface run in '92, after he comes back, that one was pretty shitty too.
Yeah, I mean, it And I mean, talking about a guy who lives the gimmick, he actually changed it. He changed his name. I mean, most people,
Well, so did Cody Rhodes. Don't forget that Cody Rhodes changed his name to Cody Rhodes now. By the way.
No, sorry, it's just Cody. He doesn't call himself Rhodes.
He changed his name from Cody Reynolds to Cody Rhodes.
So I guess illegally his name.
He can use it. He can use it now. He could use the Rhodes name now, but he doesn't want to. I think it gives him a lot of sympathy overall. Like I think a lot of talking about All In predicated on how the fans felt when Cody was not allowed to use that name.
Yeah.
So he got a lot of sympathy coming out of WWE. But if you go look on, if you look at the records, it's Cody Rhodes now as his real name, formerly, Cody Reynolds.
Yeah, no, he is the current NWA champion. And speaking of,
at least he didn't change his name to Warrior, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean that's when I went to WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. He was there, and then I think it was a couple of days later he died. It's I don't know. That's just
it was right after the very next Raw.
Yeah, so
it was close.
It was very close. But
can we talk about Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude winning the NWA World Tag Team Championship in December of 1986, right after Starrcade?
Yeah, because that was kind of whenever the height of my wrestling, watching back in 1986 December. I mean, they were a great tag team. I mean, of course, we had Manny Fernandez. He was, I guess, a babyface, and Paul Jones tried to get him in his army. Finally got into his army.
He turned on Jimmy Valiant. That was a big deal.
Oh God! I mean, I wish Big Mama had turned on Jimmy.
My brother turned his back on me.
I don't understand. Back then, they did this with Tito Santana, because I'm actually looking at Tito Santana right now with one of my wrestling figures in the studios next to
Hasbro or LJN, my friend.
Well, I mean, no, I actually had the LJN, but I beat him. I beat the shit out of him.
Those LJNs, and I know there's a lot of LJN fans out there, and they're probably listening to this show. Those action figures suck. They're not posable. They're rubber dolls, and the paint comes off. Those figures are terrible. Hey,
my son currently plays with them while he's taking a bath. So he loves the Iron Sheik and Macho Man Savage.
My poor Hulk Hogan was nude by the time I was done with him. He was nude, and it looked weird.
Hey, that's a whole different podcast. But anyway, let's talk about Manny Fernandez and the Raging Bull. They were a great tag team. I mean, and they were the NWA Tag Team Champions December of '86.
Yeah, they were fantastic. Again, we see Paul Jones here.
They were not the Fantastics, but.
No, they weren't the Fantastics. Poor Tommy Rogers. But Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez, great team. And we see the elevation of Rick Rude. You basically see two guys here. One is on the way up in terms of his career, and one is on the way down in terms of their career. So they're kind of lockstep. They meet kind of right here and at this moment. And I thought they were really good. They had really, really fantastic matches. Great tag team. Although they did lose the belts on that Phantom title change, so because Rude left and went to WWF,
yeah, I mean,
as the one half of the tag team champions.
It's kind of like that Phantom tournament for the Intercontinental title. The one.
Well, they actually had dead footage of this at the very least, because it was an older match that they taped.
Yeah.
And they just said it was for the title.
Yeah, I mean they didn't have footage for the Intercontinental title because there wasn't a tournament. They just
Rio de Janeiro, 1979.
Oh God, you know why they made it in Rio de Janeiro?
Because no one would ever look.
Well, because Pat Patterson, he was the first Intercontinental champion, and he couldn't say Rio de Janeiro.
So it was a rib.
It was a rib, and hey, he got him the 1-up. He got a championship, but I mean. I think coming out of '86, in Starrcade, I mean, do you think that the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, and Rick Rude are probably the greatest tag team at that time?
I mean, I can't put them over the Midnights in terms of on the heel side. It's just the Midnights at that point are at their peak. In terms of this incarnation of the Midnights, I really do like the Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton Midnights later on, but the Midnights at this point are clicking on all cylinders, and I would put them above Fernandez and Rude at this point. But not saying that they're really good. They're really good, and Rude is amazing.
Yeah, I mean
he's one of those guys who are either overrated or underrated.
Yeah,
sometimes, depending on the time of the year, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean he was definitely.
Because you watch Rude over like Memphis, he's all right. Mid South, he wasn't good at all.
How do you really
You know,
feel?
his time in Dallas, wasn't the greatest. But by the time he's in Crockett, he is really, really good, and he would get better. I think his peak, his best year was like 88, 90. Um, Even those matches with Steamboat later on in WCW in '92 were fantastic. And then, right before he got hurt, his career ended young for him. His life ended young.
Yeah, I mean that seems to be a staple in wrestling. I mean, normally wrestlers don't die of natural causes. I mean, unless they're older. I mean, younger ones not so much. But speaking of things ending '86, the Bunkhouse Stampede, they were really building this up. I mean, it was. I'm not sure if it was a gimmick $25,000 each time, or if it was actually a shoot $25,000. But
well, since Dusty won it, it was probably a shoot 25 grand.
And he won most of them, didn't he?
He won. Well, the way I guess it was like whoever won the most Bunkhouse Stampede would be the Bunkhouse Stampede's champion. And this one ended at a tie with him and Big Bubba. So Cornette came back as like, well, yeah, you won one more match, but we won more money because there was one that was, one Stampede that was a larger purse for that particular event. So they would have I guess a one-on-one Bunkhouse Stampede cage match to determine the Bunkhouse Stampede champion, which Dusty ended up winning.
Of course. And speaking, I mean, this is not this year, but they had the Bunkhouse Stampede on pay-per-view.
Yes, in my home arena, the Nassau Coliseum.
What were your thoughts on that? I mean, it was
the Bunkhouse Stampede in terms of a pay-per-view overall. The match, is pretty shitty.
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe for the house shows it might be good, but putting that on a pay-per-view, it's not. It's weird. It's just the dynamics of that match where it's a battle royal, but you gotta chuck the guy over the cage. And if I'm a wrestler in that match, I'm holding on to the bottom ropes.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
It
gets awkward and weird because you got to get them up and then over the cage.
Yeah, that's just. I mean, it was.
WWF did those too. They were competing in 1987. They did Bunkhouse Stampede matches also.
Yeah, I mean,
which is bizarre.
I mean, that was kind of the final big event coming out of 1986. I mean, the next big show will be the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament. I mean, what were your thoughts? We're not going to go into that. We're actually going to go with that on episode number 6 next week. But what were your thoughts on the overall concept, the overall feel of the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup?
I thought it was really cool. The first one, which was co-promoted with Mid-South, so you had Mid-South teams, you had Crockett teams, and you had a team representing Japan. This year, it was basically mostly, for the most part, in-house Crockett guys. But the overall legacy of Jim Crockett Promotions, during Jim Crockett Senior's days, it was the premier tag team promotion. So he was really big on tag team matches. Eventually, they did make the switch when they had like Paul Jones and Johnny Valentine's as their big single stars. Mm-hmm. But for the majority of Jim Crockett Promotions' existence, it's been the top tag team promotion in the world. So they brought that back with this particular tournament to kind of, make sure that Jim Crockett Senior's legacy is still, in the forefront while they're doing this national expansion.
Yeah, I mean, next week we're going to kind of a teaser. We're going to talk Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup 1987. If anybody listening wants to look at that, just type it in the old Google machine and YouTube. Unfortunately, it's not on the WWE Network, but I do have a copy that was sent to me by the great Alex G.
It's weird because it was a Crockett home video release.
Yeah.
And the WWE has not done anything with a lot of their home video release. I want to see Danger Zone because that tape's on the beginning of all the Starrcades, that commercial. Oh, and I want to see that. Same thing with the War Games. Now, the War Games have been released on WWF DVD, and I think you can find them. But the majority of War Games, that was a home video release. You never really saw, especially the one at the Orange Bowl.
Yeah,
you don't really get to see those very often. I have those because I had those tapes.
I mean, the funny thing is about the Danger Zone. I think I ordered that. It was. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a terrible videotape. I
Oh, I'm
ca-
sure. I'm sure.
and of course it came with the men of the NWA.
Do you
And
still have that calendar?
no, I do not.
Yes, you
No, and
do.
has
Why did you lying to me? You still have it.
it's Missy. It's got Missy Hyatt in it, but
It does. It
I'm
does.
just saying. But is there anything else coming out of Starrcade, the
Well,
Fallout?
we had a big debut in January of '87.
Oh yeah, would you like to inform our millions and billions of listeners that who that debuted in January of '87?
In January '87, the Total Package Lex Luger debuts in Jim Crockett Promotions. He comes out on World Championship Wrestling, and he cuts his promo saying that he's a big star and he's coming to Jim Crockett Promotions to join the Horsemen. And this is the first time where we see someone actively trying to join the Four Horsemen. And to me, I think the interesting part about this, go back and watch it. I think it's the January 7th show. It's early January. Go back and watch it, and it feels very much like the prototype or the first time we would see someone getting called up to the main roster. It feels like Luger was in NXT and he was called up to Jim Crockett Promotions. Because Florida at the time was a satellite of Jim Crockett Promotions. They had, I guess, bought Florida. I mean, that transaction is very nuanced and shaky anyway. But prior to Lex Luger coming to Jim Crockett Promotions, he was in Florida, and he was, at this point, I believe he was a babyface right before he ended up leaving. And he was teaming with Barry Windham. And I guess a lot of people remember that famous match with him and Bruiser Brody, where Brody stopped selling. So Luger just climbed the cage and ran away because he thought Brody was going to kill him. And Brody would do stuff like that. But, we would see Luger here for the first time. It does feel like someone coming up from NXT. It has that, that has that feel towards it. And he's coming out and he's talking about, essentially the top guys in the promotion. And now Luger was a high-priced talent just from the beginning. And they had someone that they pinned a lot of hopes on, especially, with them losing Magnum TA. And we'll see his progression throughout 1987. He would eventually join the Horsemen, and then he would turn babyface, and then he got ruined a couple of times because they kept on switching him too often. And then, to be completely honest, and I know I'm a Lex Luger apologist, I get that. I think he is vastly underrated at this point in terms of his overall ring work. I think he is super underrated. Go back and watch them again. I suggest people doing that. The guy looked like freaking He-Man. He looked like He-Man from Masters of the Universe. Great body, athletic enough. His promos, average at best. And his bell-to-bell work rate was average at best. But he wasn't, like, people make him out to be like literally the wrestling antichrist. Like, holy crap. He wasn't that bad. Did he have his best matches with Ric Flair? Yes. Did everyone have their best matches with Ric Flair? Yes. You know what I mean? He also had great matches with Barry Windham. He had great matches with Nikita Koloff, which you would think would be terrible on paper, but if you go back and watch those matches again, they're not too bad. Luger gets a rap because he's arrogant, which he is, or at least he was, and he's aloof. He was never a wrestling fan. He came out of football and got made all this, big time contracts, right coming off of wrestling without paying any dues. And I understand why the boys don't like him. I'm not necessarily understanding why the fans don't like him. Yeah, his work was average, but so was Hogan's. I think Lex Luger's a better worker than the Ultimate Warrior. His promos are weird, and he mispronounces things all the time. But that's part of the Lex Luger charm. Like, all the stuff that people hate about him or will use to criticize him makes him an interesting character to me. Like, he's someone who's portraying the total package, but he keeps on saying allocades all the time, and that's not a word. And he would high-five people and not look at them in the eye, or just mistime high-fives all the time. He was clumsy and awkward, yes, but that's all part of the Lex Luger charm.
Well, and speaking of things that are not just average, they are extremely above average. We got a brand new segment. It's a short segment here this week. The Retro Wrestling Video Game, Pro Wrestling Video Game of the Week is picked by Alex G. Alex G, drum roll, please. What is that? What is that video game of the week?
Well, we're going to talk about, and real quickly, we're going to talk about Fire Pro Wrestling D for the Sega Dreamcast. Now, this game for me personally was my gateway to Japanese professional wrestling games. Again, this is a Japanese exclusive. We didn't get it over in the States. And I do have a quick story about this game. I was working at Surge Merchandise at the time. I was working in the toy department. I'm, I guess, 17, 18 years old or whatever. And, you know, my buddy at work, who was also a big wrestling fan, he was telling me about this game. And he was telling me that you can play as every wrestler ever. It doesn't matter if they're in WCW, it doesn't matter if they're WWF. You know, they have old school guys. They got guys from Japan. They have UFC guys in there. They got K1 kickboxing guys in there. I'm like, you are lying to my face because that's impossible. You're not going to have a game with WWF guys and WCW guys. And he's like, no, like come over to my house after work and I'll show it to you. So he pops in this game, and he wasn't lying. He had everyone in the game. Again, he went in and changed their names back to what they were supposed to be. And Dreamcast, you know, back in the day, is a super easy system to either get modded or, you know, the flashes so you can play either import games or even burn games. There were guys back in the day that used to just burn CDs because they use CDRs essentially for the system, so you can burn a game on your computer and just play it on the Sega Dreamcast. So it's a phenomenal game. It's a good entry point for anyone who's interested in the Fire Pro Wrestling series. Again, Fire Pro Wrestling World has just come out, and I think it was the best wrestling game of 2001.
Yeah, I we'll kind of go into that in the future on kind of retro video games and how the video games of today and the video games of yesterday, they're totally different. I know you have I know you get on your soapbox about that, so we won't do that this week. But hey, to kind of wrap up this week's edition of Retro Wrestling Rewind, where we look at the fallout of Starrcade '86 and the Bunkhouse Stampede. I know people, they've been asking me this at work. They've been asking me this on the street. How in the hell do I get to that Retro Wrestling Video Games channel on YouTube? I mean, and I couldn't tell them fast enough. They were on their Google machine typing it in YouTube. I mean, you are more over than Dusty.
Wait, Ice Train is coming through.
Uh-oh.
Ice Train.
Oh God, what do we do to piss him off? Anyway, you're more over than Dusty Rhodes booking back in 1986. How do people get? Of course, they can click on the description, the show notes of Retro Wrestling Rewind, but if they don't have anything to write down, if they don't have the ability to do that, how do they get there?
Well, all they gotta do is you go into YouTube and you type in Retro Wrestling Games Presents, and we are the first thing that pops up. You know, we have over 200 videos, content for days, and we do primarily, you know, retro wrestling game reviews. We have the NWA 1984 project, and we're doing some arcade game reviews as well. So please come check us out. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you share it with all your friends, and make sure you hit the little bell so you're notified when a new video comes up. We do videos weekly, so you might see 2 to 3 videos every single week.
Yeah, trust me, folks. This man stays up late and many hours putting this stuff together just for his fans. And of course, if you want to follow us on the Retro Wrestling Rewind podcast, we have a brand new Twitter account. It's the RW Rewind. Just like us, share us, and of course, if you go on the description in the show notes, it has everything, how to get to our YouTube channel. Of course, the Starrcade episode of the YouTube episode of Starrcade is up right now on YouTube. Just type in the Retro Wrestling Rewind and it'll pop up. We're the only one there.
Leave a comment. If I said something stupid and you disagree with me, comment on it and I'll get back to you. I will talk to you. I will engage you. So if you agree with me, you disagree with us, it doesn't matter. Leave a comment. If you want us to have a fat head, say that. It's all good.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could do that too, but also subscribe because like the Retro Wrestling Video Games channel, you want to get notified each and every time that we put something up. It's once a week. It's always the week after this episode drops. So the YouTube version of this show will be dropping next week. It's an extra outlet for us. We're going to expand. It's going to be great. But next week, of course, like I said, we're going to be talking Jim Crockett's Senior Memorial Cup 1987. So for the great Alex G, I'm David Fine. I hope you have a great Monday. We'll see you back here on the Retro Wrestling Rewind exclusively on the Beyond the Ropes Radio Network.